Awesome. So I think we should start to be hearing the interpretation. If anybody's in the interpretation room, could we get a thumbs up or thumbs up from the interpreters to make sure everything is running smoothly in the rooms? Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. So again, welcome to this briefing on the state of the air, a report the American Lung Association came out with in coordination with us, Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. I'm Cynthia Pinto Cabrera, the policy coordinator with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, or CVAC. And today we're joining forces really to share some of the latest data that American Lung Association has been able to put together and share. So we're staying very specific to the San Joaquin Valley in this briefing and what the results are from that report and how it affects us here in the San Joaquin Valley and our health. So I wanted to start off with a quick kind of context setting to why some of the results that we're going to be seeing from the report are the way that they are. So the San Joaquin Valley is an really large area covering 250 miles all the way from San Joaquin County to Kern County. It is an extremely diverse region where we have 27,000 square miles area coverage. We have 70 different ethnicities throughout the region, 105 languages spoken throughout the region as well. We are one of the most agriculturally productive regions in the world, and based on our economy, development, oil, and agriculture are actually also the biggest contributors to our air pollution here in the San Joaquin Valley. So development, oil, and agriculture play a really big role in our economy, but also our air pollution. And because of those different industries, it's resulted in a large environmental justice and civil rights issues for the region. We're seeing high levels of persistent and concentrated poverty. So that is poverty that's lasting 2 decades or more, and concentrated poverty where resources aren't distributed equally throughout the region. And we have some of the highest food insecurity rates in California, despite being the most agriculturally productive region in the world. And we're seeing contaminated air, water, and soil. And here on the right side, we have some images of how red the San Joaquin Valley is because our air, water, and soil are extremely contaminated. And the 2 other images are some satellite images of our air pollution from the sky. So because of our air pollution issues, we're seeing environmental justice and major civil rights violations happening. So this is for the end. I'll stop sharing my screen right now. So that was some background context on where some of our air pollution comes from and what we mean when we say the San Joaquin Valley. So with that, I want to pass it to Mariela and Will to talk a little bit about the state of the air report and what their findings were, and I'll pull that up in the background while they introduce themselves.
Great. Well, thank you, Cynthia, and hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight to learn about our new report on local air quality issues and national air quality issues. I'm Will Barrett. I'm the Senior Director for Clean Air Advocacy with the American Lung Association. I work in Sacramento and focus on local, state, and federal clean air issues. I've been a participant in the CVAC community for many years, and really, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here tonight to go through the report findings again. We've done this, I think, for the last 3 to 4 years with a real focus on the Valley. So happy to be here. And I'll ask my colleague Mariela to say hello as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariela Racho. I'm the Senior Clean Air Advocacy Manager.
Mariela, you're muted. It looks like you might be the muting the original audio under the interpretation. Maybe.
Oof. Okay.
Oh, everyone else can hear her.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear her.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Hopefully.
go on. I can't hear you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Mariela Racho. I'm the Senior Clean Air Advocacy Manager with the American Lung Association, also here from Sacramento. And let us know if you have any questions at the end. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mariela, and sorry for my technical ignorance. I am all set now. I can hear you. Yep, got it. So thanks, everyone. Again, we'll walk through the report findings. We'll start with the national report and then kind of drill down from there, and then kind of walk through how you can access information on the report on your own after this, and we'll take questions at the end with Cynthia and the team. So, Cynthia, we can go to the next slide, please. And so, again, this was our 25th annual State of the Air report. The original report was published in the year 2000. And what we try to do with the report is really focus public attention on ozone and particle pollution, which are two of the most widespread and dangerous air pollutants that are regulated under the Federal Clean Air Act. I want to note that the report is not a grading system on local, state, or federal air agencies. Certainly, there are other organizations that do those types of report cards. These agencies are helpful to us in putting the report together and doing data collection and analysis, fact-checking with us. And here on the screen, you can see that we really try to make this a really accessible way of looking at air quality data. And we, again, look at air quality monitoring information that's been gathered at these local, state, tribal, and federal monitors and checked by federal agency for accuracy. And we do that across the country. So we give out grades to counties across the United States that have air quality monitoring. We give out rankings to counties and to metropolitan areas across the country based on the number of unhealthy ozone days or the unhealthy particle pollution days or the annual levels of particle concentration in the air recorded over a 3-year time period. This year's report for 2024, the time window that we're looking at is 2020 through 2022. So that 3-year window is what our results are based on in this year's report. So with that, we'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so particle pollution, we look at this 2 different ways in the report. We take the annual average of number of days that reach unhealthy levels of particle pollution, as well as we look at the annual concentration of particle pollution in the air. And for that metric, we have a pass-fail grade, while all the other metrics in the report are graded on a report card A through F, like a school report card. So particle pollution, which we know the San Joaquin Valley has the most difficult particle challenges in the nation, refers to a mix of tiny bits of solids and liquids in the air we breathe. Particle pollution comes from many sources, including those that Cynthia shared on her slide: factories, power plants, diesel and gasoline-powered vehicles, agricultural equipment. Wildfires are an increasing source of particle pollution that we'll touch on a little bit. Next slide, please. So ozone pollution, the other metric we look at, this is a colorless, odorless, corrosive gas that can really attack your breathing tissues, your airways, your lungs. And this is formed when certain chemicals released by, again, transportation sources, especially in California, and other sources, mix in the atmosphere on hot, sunny days, and they have this chemical reaction that forms into ozone, which again has that corrosive effect on our airways. And sometimes we say that the effect of a sunburn on the skin, that's kind of how you can think about the impacts of ozone on your airways. And both of these pollutants, if we go to the next slide, have major public health implications. So ozone and particle pollution cause harm to children and adults at every stage of life across multiple systems of the body, not just our lungs. So we're trying to call attention to the fact that millions and millions of people are at greater risk because of unhealthy air. Everyone from children, seniors, people with lung diseases like asthma or COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, people with heart conditions, lung cancer, individuals who are pregnant and their fetuses, people with lower incomes, people of color, and people who work or exercise outdoors are all at greater risk for a variety of factors based on, again, a significant body of research. And so what we often say is basically everyone in your family, everyone has someone in your family who is impacted. We know that this is just a wide net of people whose health is at risk because of unhealthy air. So on this slide, you see just a range again of the negative health consequences of ozone and or particle pollution and the ways that that can impact people's health. So next slide, please. So basically, for the last 50 years, the nation has been implementing the Federal Clean Air Act. And what we're looking at here is tremendous progress has been made nationally in cleaning up air pollution under the Federal Clean Air Act, but there's still far too many people living in communities impacted by unhealthy levels of air pollution. Nationally, roughly 4 out of every 10 people living in the United States live in a community that receives a failing grade for at least one of the 3 categories we have in the report. And what we find is that, so that's about 130 million people. That's higher than last year. Again, nearly 40% of people in the United States. There are about 2 million children in the country living with asthma in these counties with failing grades, as well as 15 million plus older adults or adults with chronic lung disease. And one of the key things, again, to Cynthia's point at the beginning, that we highlight in the report is when we look across the country, we see significant disparities, of course. And again, our report is on a county level. So if you go to a more narrow or finer scale for geography, whether that's at the neighborhood level, census tract, zip code, you would find even greater disparities, most likely, across the country when looking at air quality data, and that's where environmental justice issues come up. In our report, based again on county level information, a person of color in the United States is over twice as likely to live in a community with failing grades across the board in our report. So again, we know that everyone's at risk due to unhealthy air, but too many communities are bearing much greater burdens based on local sources of pollution and their exposures leading to all of those negative health consequences typically are more concentrated in communities with lower incomes and communities of color. So next slide, please. What we've seen here is about 3 out of 10 people in the United States live in a community with unhealthy levels of ozone pollution or smog. And while ozone is generally improved over the decades because of clean air policies that have really forced stronger technology advancements, especially in the transportation sector, there's still far too many people, 100 million, living in communities across the nation with high unhealthy levels of ozone pollution days. Next slide, please. For year-round or annual particle pollution, the key message here is that there was significantly more people in the report this year in counties with failing grades because we based this year's report on the new, more health protective annual particle pollution standards that were adopted by the US EPA or Environmental Protection Agency in February. It was a very long time in the making. We could think that the EPA could have gone further and set more health protective standards, but what they did set is really illustrating that about 70 million more American people living in America were dealing with higher levels of particle pollution than were healthy. So in last year's report, there were about 20 million people living in these counties with a failing grade for annual particle pollution. When we look at it under the new metric, under the annual particle pollution standard that was just set, 70 million more people are added to that mix. You've got 90 million now living in a county in the United States with unhealthy levels of ozone or annual particle pollution. And really what it tells us is that they're most likely were breathing unhealthy air for many, many years, but not protected by a stronger standard. So that's kind of been a key message we've been trying to convey, is that the risk to people's health has been higher than the standards have said, which is why we're also calling for a stronger ozone standard at this stage. Next slide, please. So for the daily particle pollution metric, this is short-term spikes in particle pollution. So when particle levels jump to unhealthy, or particle pollution jumps to unhealthy levels on a given day, that's what we're talking about here. So the days when those pollution levels spike. And this continues to get worse. This year, 65 million people lived in counties with an F grade for this short-term measure of particle pollution. This is 1 million more than in last year's report. And it's more than anyone that we've seen in the last more than a decade. So not only we're seeing more unhealthy days in a lot of communities, but we're seeing those standards, we're seeing those days hitting higher, more unhealthy levels. So the worst days are getting worse. There are more days that are harmful, but the worst days are getting worse. And all of the most polluted cities in the nation are in the Western United States when we're looking at this report, and many of them had their worst ever days for particle pollution in this year's report. Next slide, please. And again, as we're talking about particle pollution, we're dealing with this increase in wildfire impacts, adding tremendous levels of particle pollution in many cases to those everyday sources of pollution that need to be cleaned up. That baseline of agricultural equipment, oil and gas, diesel trucking, and other sources that are adding to the local threats of air pollution and layering in on top of that blankets of particle pollution from nearby and far away, often wildfire smoke that just really adds to the challenges of keeping the air healthy for everyone. So we have wildfire impacts, extreme heat adding to the likelihood of ozone to form on those hotter, sunnier days, drought conditions that can have the impact of really capping particle pollution for days or weeks at a time when there's no rain, essentially, to wash out the particles from the air. So that can hang around longer in drought conditions, all of which are becoming more commonplace in the context of climate change. Next slide, please, and then I'll turn it over to Mariella in just a moment. So as I mentioned, wildfires are not only increasing, the harm caused or the risk posed by some of those extreme wildfire events are hitting higher levels than we'd seen before. So this chart essentially illustrates the 21 years or so, I think it is, of particle pollution data that we've been able to include in the report. And what you're seeing here is just the big jumps in the number of days that hit very unhealthy, that's the purple days, or maroon days that are hazardous under the air quality index. So they're a serious threat to everyone living in those areas. They're unlike anything we've seen in the history of the State of the Air report. As we're just starting, or in recent years, we're seeing more and more catastrophic wildfire episodes that are putting more and more particle emissions into the air, and often, again, keeping that particle pollution close to the ground, close to people, for longer periods of time. And I'll just end this section of it by saying, this year, again, the window for this year's report was 2020 through 2022. We saw in California some of the most damaging or largest, most catastrophic wildfires in state history recorded in that time period. In the next year's report, we will be including 2023 data that will likely show, the impacts of the June 2023 Canadian wildfires that blanketed much of the United States, on the eastern United States, with particle pollution smoke. So we would expect to see even higher levels of focus on wildfire smoke episodes in next year's report. So with that, I'll turn it to Mariella for the next section.
Thank you, Will. I'm just going to bring this information down to the state and local level. So 38 million people in California live in a community with at least one failing grade. That's the 98% you see here. And then 32 million live in a community with 3 failing grades in the State of the Air report for 2024. Overall, more people in California breathe the unhealthiest air compared to other parts of the nation. Next slide. As you can see here, the San Joaquin County received 2 failing grades, and all the other counties in the valley received failing grades for all 3 categories, which these are the categories that we look at in our State of the Air report, showing that, again, that the valley has the worst air in the nation, and we have a long way to go to improve air quality in this area specifically. Next slide. Here you can see most ozone polluted cities in the United States, including most counties in the valley at the top of the list for the worst ozone. Also, 6 California cities are in the top 10 list for the worst ozone in the nation. Next slide. Here you can see the most polluted cities for the United States for annual particle pollution. The counties in the valley ranking in the top 5, Bakersfield, Visalia, Fresno, and the Bay Area, each represent the San Joaquin Valley counties. And then the northern San Joaquin Valley counties are included in the Bay Area border metro areas. And then here again, also 6 California cities are in the top 10 list for the annual particle pollution overall. Thank you. And then let's see, next slide. And then lastly, here you can see the most polluted cities in the United States for short-term particle pollution. Particle pollution spikes, again, valley communities dominating the list, and overall 7 California cities are in the top 10 list for the worst annual particle for the worst short-term particle pollution. Next, I'll just turn it over to Will to go over how to obtain all this information from our website.
Thanks, Mariela. So I just put in the chat the link to the report. So copy paste that, or lung.org/SOTA for State of the Air. And we wanted to just kind of highlight some of the resources we have on the website that you can use to dig up more specific data, or look at the trends and other resources that we have in the report. So when you get to the state report card page, you'll see a tab with county ozone grades, for example, a tab for county particle pollution grades, and then a tab for populations at risk. And this isn't so much an issue in the San Joaquin Valley, but there are a lot of counties across the country that don't have air quality monitoring information, so those wouldn't be in the report. But so there are some in California that don't show up in the report, but all in the San Joaquin Valley do. The list can be sorted by county or grade or weighted average. So the numbers can be sorted to show, where the county lands within the mix in the state. And then if you click on each county page, it will take you to the specific page on that county. So why don't we go to the next slide? So here we clipped out, if you were to click on Fresno, you'd see the state page for the Fresno. This is the for Fresno County. And what you see represented on the page are the grades for Fresno County. So a failing grade for ozone, a failing grade for 24-hour or short-term particle pollution, and then a failing grade again for the annual particle pollution levels. And we have a link to the related metropolitan area. And what that does is takes you to a separate page that will show the Fresno metro area, which includes Fresno, Madera, and Kings County. And so all of that would be kind of combined into the Fresno metro area. And to Mariela's point about the San Francisco Bay Area metropolitan area, it does include, based on the U.S. The federal designations for metropolitan areas, the three northern San Joaquin counties are contained in the San Francisco Bay Area metropolitan area. That change happened at the federal level, I want to say about 5 or so, maybe 5 to 10 years ago. So in past years before that, you might see Modesto on the list or Stockton on the list of most polluted, but now those are and the U.S. Census Bureau's designation, part of the broad Bay Area that now encompasses 14 counties across Northern California. So I just wanted to highlight that if you're looking for some of the northern cities on our list, they might be kind of contained in that Bay Area, and happy to walk anyone through that if it's helpful. The last thing on the county and metropolitan pages you would find are demographics of populations, vulnerable populations. So children with asthma, adults with asthma, people living with lung cancer or heart disease, and other demographic information that makes people more vulnerable to the impacts of unhealthy air pollution. And to note, I mean, there's a lot of other resources out there to help with these kind of data collections. We do hear often that this kind of information is very helpful when people are looking for grant funding or trying to put a fine point on who's at risk because of these air pollutants when they're making, say, public comments or writing letters to the editor. Ways of being, they're advocacy tools that we're trying to just kind of highlight that people can use. Next slide, please. And here, this is an important, I think, part of the report where you can look at the county page and see how the county has done on a given air pollutant over the 25-year history of the report. So here for Fresno County and for San Joaquin County, you see the trend going in the right direction from a significantly higher place at the beginning of the report to still, and especially the Fresno chart, still, over 50 unhealthy ozone pollution days per year on average. And so still far too many, but it's approximately 4 months of unhealthy ozone days fewer than in the first year of the report. So significant progress, but still a long way to go, tends to be some of our key messaging. We know that there's been good progress. That good progress was hard fought. It took a lot of advocacy, a lot of policymaker commitment to clean air, but we need that to continue. We need to see that stepped up, especially in the face of climate change. One piece of good news that Mariela noted, we do not have failing grades for all three pollutants in every county. San Joaquin County saw its first passing grade for ozone in this year's report. So a significant, progress has been made in terms of reducing the pollutants that form ozone. So things from the transportation sector and other sectors that have been reduced over time, and now we're seeing that no longer seeing a failing grade for ozone in San Joaquin County. So that's a good news piece in the report to highlight. Next slide, please. Great. So one of the things that we'll highlight here is that the San Joaquin Valley, obviously, to many of you on the line, well aware that the particle pollution challenges in the San Joaquin Valley are well known, the most severe in the nation, and we still have a long way to go. Our report does include the impacts of wildfires, so you see a lot of fluctuation in our report. Those wouldn't necessarily be included in the regulatory process for when standards are set and and then policies are adopted to achieve those standards. Wildfires don't fully play into that equation, but that data is included in our report because we want people to understand, kind of the levels of pollution that were recorded, even if local and state agencies can take those wildfire impacted days out of their regulatory process for determining whether they're meeting a standard. So here, what you see is Kern County's annual particle pollution average is twice the national standard. The new national standard was set at 9 micrograms per cubic meter, a way of getting to the average of annual particle pollution exposures. And so we have seen progress from the earlier years of the report, but Kern County still faces the highest annual particle pollution average in the nation. And to the question on the measurement, basically there are two ways that particle pollution is measured. One of them is the severity of the day. So if the day hits a certain level of particle pollution, it gets into unhealthy levels. That's what's recorded in our short-term particle pollution level or grading. And then the annual particle pollution, that's particle pollution monitored at these air quality monitors, the average taken over the whole year of the highest concentrations of particle pollution. So on the one hand, you have a count of the number of days that get into that unhealthy range, and then this annual average for Kern County is showing the average of concentration of particles in the air. So that's the differentiation. And so the new particle pollution standard was set at 9 micrograms. So that line would be roughly halfway up the chart. And Kern County's double that. So it's far in excess of the standard as measured in our report, and it has the highest annual average in the nation. For Tulare County, we've seen higher numbers of days when the pollution spikes. And those days are definitely impacted by the local sources of pollution, but also any wildfires that occur. And in this chart on the right side, you certainly see that impact of big jump in particle pollution that follows some of those major wildfires in the Sierra, for example. Next slide, please. Okay, so here I mentioned a little bit about advocacy opportunities with the report. One of the key ways that this report gets out there is we do a very large push to get the report out to the media. And we think that it's a really useful tool when you see, some of the coverage of the report that continues to go forward, really being able to relate that to local or certain state policy issues that you may be focused on, and writing a letter to the editor or writing an op-ed. Actually, the San Francisco Chronicle piece that was highlighted here was written by Mariella that we released on the day of the report coming out. And you see just a significant amount of interest in this report because of that local, the local nature of the report, where it's county-based and provides those rankings and grades. So the Fresno Bee, the Bakersfield Californian wrote an editorial about the report, and it just gets a lot of coverage, and there's a lot of opportunities to kind of highlight a local policy issue that you might be interested in, and contact that reporter who may have written one of these articles and say, here's another piece that you might be interested in. Here's another angle on the story that wasn't told. The Lung Association data doesn't go down to the county level or beyond the county level, or it doesn't, we don't look at the local sources of pollution that you're far more familiar with than would be included in our report, like a freeway expansion project in South Fresno, for example. Those kind of things that we think the report can help with by explaining that, these are some of the most polluted communities in the United States. And if we're making policy decisions that don't track with cleaning up that pollution as urgently as needed, especially in our most impacted communities, that's where we hope that the report can be a useful tool for advocates on the ground who are doing such amazing work. And with that, I will turn it back for the next slide, just to ask if there are any questions. But again, really do appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and share the report again. And again, it's part of a conversation that's longer, and we're very much happy to help. So thanks, Cynthia.
Yeah, of course. So we have a couple questions in the chat, and if folks have any questions, feel free to drop any additional questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand to do that. So the first question that we have is that you mentioned EPA changed their standards to be more protective, but American Lung believes that they could be even stronger. So how much stronger would American Lung recommend they be?
Great question. The basic idea was that the Lung Association and many other advocacy organizations across the country were calling for EPA to follow their own scientific advisors on setting the strongest, most health protective particle pollution standards. EPA put out a proposed range of going from the 12 microgram standard to essentially looking at 9 or 10 micrograms, with taking comment on 8 micrograms, which was our preferred outcome. We would have certainly appreciated EPA following the advice of their own scientific advisors in setting the most health protective standard based entirely on public health research and scientific research at 8 micrograms. They also did not make changes to the short-term particle standard, which we were calling for, along with many other clean air advocates. So they left some room on the table for further improvement. We certainly want to see that taken up again. And then on the other side of the table, the ozone standard, Biden administration, we're calling it on them as one of our key advocacy points of the report, to move quickly to update the ozone pollution standards, which have been far overdue. So that's next on the list that needs to be done as quickly as possible. And again, follow the health science, which is the only standard that, the only information that should be influencing what the standard is set to, according to the Clean Air Act. So hopefully that helps.
I'll just add that the recommendations are based on studies and are considered to be the most health protective. So these are based on health and people being able to breathe. So just take that into consideration too.
Right, and it is the intention has to be to set the standards with the adequate margin of safety to protect those more vulnerable populations, like Mariella said. And, I think it is important to note too that the standards that were put forward are far more health protective than the prior standards. They'll save, thousands and thousands of lives, and really will shift a focus to greater cleanup of particle pollution across the country. So these are important steps forward and something to build on into the future. So I just wanted to highlight that, we wish they would have gone further. They are far more health protective, and we need to see full implementation going into the future.
Yeah, thanks, Will and Mariela, for answering that question. The next one that we had in the chat is, how does American Lung Association propose adopting new standards for wanting to reduce and mitigate pollutants? So I think that might just be any standards that you all are advocating for right now, or what ALA, is generally advocating for to reduce pollutants.
Sure. Actually, Marielle and I are working on this pretty constantly. So there were 8 clean air standards that we worked on that were adopted by the State Air Resources Board over the last 3 years. They took many years to develop, but a lot of our organizations on this call and members of the public weighed in, calling for California to adopt stronger state level regulations, everything from cleaning up leaf blowers to locomotive operations to cleaner trucks, shifting to zero emission trucks and zero emission vehicles. All of those adopted standards, as well as off-road equipment like agricultural and construction equipment, all of those off-road, all of those programs that were adopted by the Air Resources Board over, the last, 2021 through 2023, they're estimated to save over $100 billion in public health benefits, 10,000 lives saved through implementation over the course of those requirements, but they're not yet able to be fully implemented until the US EPA grants a waiver under the Clean Air Act to allow California to implement, or in some cases to grant an authorization, which is similar to waiver but different part of the Clean Air Act. And basically, we're calling on EPA to move through that list of 8 standards as quickly as possible, because we know just how urgently needed these are, not only to meet our clean air standards, but to reduce cancer risk in highly impacted communities, especially when you're looking at places impacted by locomotives, diesel truck routes. These are the kind of policies that we spend a lot of our state level time on at the Lung Association right now. And then we're also very much involved in advocacy in the state budget realm, where there's a lot of cuts being proposed, and really trying to protect clean air investments going forward. So hopefully that's some helpful flavor on what we're up to.
Yeah, thank you. The next question that we have is excluding wildfire smoke. What is the main contributor to PM 2.5 in Kern County? Not sure if your report goes into that, but if you all found anything when reviewing the data that you could share.
I don't have anything offhand. Mariela, yes, do you have anything in front of you with inventory? I'd imagine maybe not, but
I don't.
okay. So certainly we can look into it and follow up on the question, but historically we've seen a lot of impacts, certainly from mobile sources, from the diesel agricultural equipment, and wood stoves, certainly large contributors. The commercial charbroiling, and again, I'm saying this more generally than Kern County, so I just don't have the information handy, but the basic idea is that particle pollution is typically caused by combustion sources, agricultural burning, obviously a major source as well in parts of the valley. And then you have the secondary formation of particles from, again, NOx emission or oxides of nitrogen being emitted through combustion in the transportation sector largely, as well as from oil and gas and dairy operations that are contributing to the formation of particles down in the atmosphere. So I think we can follow up if there's on inventory questions, unless somebody else on the line has a clear answer or citation they can drop in the chat. That'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question that we have is what's the status of engagement on the Valley with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District on enforcement, or are they a lost cause? I don't know if you want to share how American Lung Association engages with local air districts, but I'm happy to share some perspective on that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not likely to have a good response on that. As I said at the beginning, we get a lot of help from the district in putting our report together and hearing about policies and programs. So I don't have a pulse on the finger of enforcement issues, but Cynthia is certainly better prepared to discuss that.
Yeah, definitely. So Woody asked that in terms of engagement, we regularly on CVAC and many partners that are on here regularly engage in workshops, their board hearings, just stay up to date with the latest. However, CVAC has adopted the position that the Valley Air Pollution Control District is a captured agency. Essentially, we have found significant evidence that their ties to development, oil, and agriculture significantly weigh on their decision making when it comes to all of their regulations, the clean air plans that are being adopted. And we have actually done a webinar, I believe 2 years ago now, where we dove into some of that, research, where we connected some of the ties to those industries. Happy to share that with folks who might be interested. But CVAC is under the position that Valley Air Pollution Control District is essentially a lost cause, but we still maintain active engagement. And towards the end, before we sign off, we do have a call to action. Our latest clean air plans for PM 2.5, those fine particle pollutants are going to be adopted this summer. So there's some opportunities to get engaged and, give our decision makers a piece of our mind and share what we believe are real solutions that need to be looked into a little bit further. So that's where we're at. Do folks have, Jasmine just dropped in the chat that webinar we did 2 years ago where we dove into some of the political dynamics of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and why our position is that of it being captured agency. So feel free to check that out on whenever you can. But do folks have any other questions or comments on the presentations that we provided today? Well, with that, let me just share my screen one more time. Let's see if anybody has their hand up. No? All right. So I'll share my screen one more time and talk a little bit about what is happening at the state level. As I mentioned, we're currently in a time period where we're going to have our latest clean air plan be adopted. In June, it's going to be adopted by our local air pollution control district. And then in July, going to the California Air Resources Board. Given the dynamic that I just spoke about briefly, we're really trying to focus on the California Resources Board because they're essentially, captured. They're really reliant on the development, oil, and agricultural industries, and are not paying as much attention to health as we would like them to. So we're wanting to spend some time here to invite you all to take action on July 24th at 9 a.m. Partners are going to be hosting listening sessions. We have potential opportunities to drive up there if folks are interested in joining to really tell the California Resources Board and ultimately the United States Environmental Protection Agency, who has the final say on these plans, that the San Joaquin Valley really does need to do more. As Will had mentioned throughout his presentation, progress is being made, but there's definitely a lot more that can be done. And ultimately a lot more that can be done faster. Currently, the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District is proposing to ask for an extension. So originally, the plan that they're submitting was to meet new standards, this upcoming year in 2025. However, they did some math and are saying that they can't meet it and are asking for a 5-year extension to 2030. By then, we're saying it's too late to meet the standard that they are trying to meet, as we kind of noted through this presentation, through the presentation from American Lung Association. Our levels here in the San Joaquin Valley are up to double what the health protective standards need to be. So we really do need to ask these agencies to do more and do it fast, because our health is suffering. And the Valley, a common theme that we're seeing is a lot of our friends, neighbors, or community members are suffering from chronic diseases like cancer is one of the biggest ones that a lot of folks mention, especially down in Kern County. That is a big illness that has become widespread and honestly has become normalized, and that should not be the case. So we're asking folks, to take action. and join us in whether it be virtually or in person to talk to our decision makers and share the importance of meeting our air quality standards on time and to make sure that our polluters, our bad neighbors, are not getting any more extensions or not getting any more money without really doing the work and doing what's most health protective. So with that, we really want to say thank you. We have a little sign up to participate in July, wanting to see, if we need to take a bus full of people down in Kern County. I believe some of our partners with the Central California Environmental Justice Network. So if you live down south, I believe that they're going to be hosting a watch party where you don't have to drive all the way to Sacramento, but can join virtually. And we're looking into other options for other watch parties or potentially driving folks who live closer to Sacramento up there to share their opinions. So feel free to scan it, and I can drop in the chat the link to it as well. So that's kind of it for our presentation. If anybody has any questions about the actions for July, feel free to let me know. We have some extra time we can discuss now, but wanting to provide enough time for everybody to speak or have any questions answered, and hoping that we can all engage together this summer. Thanks, Ariella. Definitely happy to share any information that we have. And let me just pull up the Google form that I had linked inside of the presentation for folks, so folks can just look at it and sign up if they're interested in getting more information. We have compiled a lot of different information as talking points for ways to guide you and what you should say to our decision makers. And later this month, we're hoping to have another one of these briefings to talk a little bit about some health research that has just come up from a local researcher, Dr. Gilda Zarate Gonzalez, who has put into numbers how much we're paying for in terms of our health when we don't go to work because we're sick because of air pollution, things like that. So do keep an eye out for that. And if you're able to sign up for the July hearing, we'll get your email, and happy to send the invitation along as well. We want to provide folks with as much information as possible before asking you all to join these meetings. And of course, we're always available if you all have any questions or comments, or want to get involved or want support to find a listening session near you where some of our partners will be hosting. So let me just drop that in the chat. Yeah, thanks for all the support on the chat. I'm hoping to see some of you all virtually or in person for July and the next workshop that we will have. Awesome. If there's no more questions or comments, then I think maybe we can log off and end early. But again, we have the Zoom room until 7:30 if anybody has any other questions.
I'll just add, if you have any questions on how to use the website and research and look up your own county, let us know. Of course, we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, then maybe Mariela, if you could put your email in the chat as well in case folks have questions. And Laura just asked a quick question. I'm curious on how many times the San Joaquin Air District has asked for extension. So this is actually, I believe, at least their second one that they have asked for. They are definitely known for asking for extensions. At least in my time in this is the second one that they'd be asking for. Awesome. I think folks are starting to log off. Thank you so much, everybody, With that, I guess I'll give you about 25 minutes of your time back. Really appreciate the effort. And do please share this recording with residents that weren't able to attend. And again, share that link for folks who are interested in, staying up to date with some of the latest action that we're doing to let our decision makers know that their decisions impact our health and we need to act now.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.